Greetings and salutations. My name is Michael Schwahn, and today we are going to talk about the time I have left. And now we are not talking about my own personal paradox and continued strain of mental capacity when it comes to thinking about the time that I have left and all of the things that I want to do, and instead I have to go to work and sleep and eat. No, not that crisis. No, instead, the video game, the time I have left, and the both incredible yet unfortunate reality that is the time I have left. But instead of just staring at me talking, let me give you an opportunity to actually take a look at the game yourself while I tell you the positives and the negatives about the time I have left. So, let's get started. Ultimately, this video is going to have three purposes. One is to show you the time I have left. Two is to provide feedback to the developers. And three is to see if you are interested in supporting the development of the game. Now, I kind of dropped a little bit of vagueness when it came to that intro in terms of the negativity. And the negativity is that this game is not close to being to release. Unfortunately, and that is the biggest negative that I have to state about it, is that I don't get to play it as soon as I had hoped, but I did get to play it in the form of a demo, but the actual full release will not be here for quite some time. But let's talk about the time I have left, and I apologize if this is a bit random because I've been trying to figure out how to do this video for a couple of days now, and ultimately there is no script or anything in front of me because I couldn't put onto a page the words that felt appropriate to share what is ultimately just a whole bunch of me rather than outwardly directly critical opinion the way of like a standard video game review from me is, where I try to be very, well, critical and analytic and stuff. And there is a little bit of that here. But so the time I have left is a game that I've been following for a very long time on social media, because I don't remember the first time I saw it. I guarantee you it was at some sort of trailer show, or I found it in something. I don't know. I check out a lot of games media, and it has this very, very unique art style, and it was immediately eye-catching to me in all of the best ways. And then I also learned later that it was a turn-based RPG, and I was like, that's like my favorite genre of game. And it has a lot of very unique circumstances that exist around it, and I mean specifically within the game itself. So first, what makes it so unique? Besides its visual style, also is that the idea is that the game is going to be 6 hours long. Now, that's not entirely true, and I'll explain why, but the main character, who has 6 hours left to live. That is it. And there is an end game timer that is counting down from 6 hours to 0. And at the end of that 6 hour timer, the main character will die. Now, the game is going to take longer than 6 hours, but ultimately that is the idea of that from the very moment the game begins, there is a timer until the game ends. And I presume you're trying to not die. The final goal has not actually ever been shared, but just through the reasonable deduction, I think what we'd all be striving for is to not die. And that is what the main character, at least from my perspective, is potentially looking for, is a way to survive. And we have now learned from the demo why they only have 6 hours left to live. So hyper minor spoilers, but it's not really, because it kind of has to be shared with you immediately for us to have the premise of the entire game's existence. There is what likely is a form of virus or disease or maybe something else that exists, simply called miasma, and it is something that you can be afflicted with. And if you are, that means that you are on a timer. Whether it is, I couldn't tell if it was like something that was very, very strictly laid out or not. It doesn't sound like it is, because it sounds like from what information I was able to gather from the demo, everyone knows that you are going to die soon, but it's not quite to the point where we have a little clock that we are tracking in the game, and that might be something more for gameplay purposes rather than for literal purposes, but I digress. And so all of the people that have been afflicted with miasma are essentially put into Logan's Run style colonies, and they have to take care of and monitor and organize themselves until presumably they all die, I guess. Let's just we're going to quarantine you, and then eventually you'll all die, and hopefully people will stop dying from miasma. I don't get the inclination that is working out for this world, but whatever. We're not focused on the grand story of the world, at least at this point, and instead we are focusing on Aline's story, which is the main character. Now, that's the premise for the game, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the gameplay. So, as I mentioned earlier, it is a turn-based RPG, but your first thought is, wait, hold on, turn-based RPG battles, they are not known to be quick. That's going to eat up my 6 hours really fast. Anyone that did the opening bombing run mission in Final Fantasy VII knows how much time a turn-based battle can take, especially when you had a timer in the corner counting down, and you can just feel the anxiety pounding in your chest, and you're like, let me go, either die or run, I don't care which one, I don't have time. The game ends when that timer hits 0. Because of the circumstances of the way that combat happens, combat takes time at 1/10 normal time. So figure that out however you want. But essentially, 1 minute is instead only 6 seconds when it turns into how much time is spent in combat, as well as in menus and a couple other things. But for the most part, that's the general way to think about it, is that anything that isn't you running around or investigating, or I would say talking, but we didn't really talk to anybody outside of one small circumstance. That is the game, is that your time is lowered, okay? Also, just real quick, if you can give me thoughts on how you feel about this smaller window, because the whole game's not going to fit, and I've done this twice now, and I don't know how I feel about it. Feedback would be great. Type that up right now if you would. I appreciate it. Anyway, so you don't have to worry too much about combat taking up all of your time. Now, the other part is that this game very clearly takes a lot of inspiration from a few different video games, the very first of which that comes to mind is Parasite Eve. Aline comes across as a very similar design to Aya Brea, the lead character of Parasite Eve, both in her visual design, the way that she kind of carries herself. The story also gives me some Parasite Eve vibes in terms of the spread of a disease of sorts and trying to potentially stop that, or at least survive it and break free from it. It just has a lot of those levels of undertones in terms of the overall presentation. Also, the kind of modernistic setting. But there's also a couple other inspirations as well. It's somewhat Parasite Eve, but I attribute this mechanic much more to Resident Evil. Thank you for waiting for me to process thoughts. Where you can investigate items in your inventory, and sometimes doing so will reveal additional details. So you can be going through your inventory, and there's a box that you can open up and find stuff in the box, and there's a clue in there that'll then allow you to open up a door later, and it gives you another way to progress. compared to if you hadn't found the box and if you hadn't taken time to look at the box. We've seen this get translated to a lot of other games that also are normally taking some sort of inspiration from Resident Evil. The most immediate which comes to mind is Signalis, which again, very Resident Evil vibes there, and also some Parasite Eve vibes. Here's the one that will might take you by surprise. The other thing that I found the largest amount of inspiration is Dark Souls. And I don't just mean in its tone, I actually mean it in its gameplay. Because unlike most turn-based RPGs, your goal is not necessarily to reduce your opponent's life points to 0. That's not your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal here is just to survive. And I think that's also a pretty good representation of the game as a whole, is that its ultimate goal is to survive. Because you are trying to survive against your enemies, and your enemies, you don't have HP, you have what's called willpower, and it is about whoever willpower runs out first, whether it's yours or your opponent's. And actions will, on your side, will either gain or cost you willpower, and it seems, at least with everything I saw, your opponent's actions all cost them willpower. So them attacking you costs them willpower, and their willpower will eventually go down to 0. Now you have 2 options when it comes to defending yourself. You can dodge or you can parry. Sound familiar? So the dodge mechanic is pretty straightforward. Your opponent is going to telegraph their attack. It's going to come from one of 3 directions, and then you hit the opposite direction from the direction the attack is coming. And if you do so at the correct timing, Aline will dodge, and then you will not be hit by that attack. Okay, and then you also, if you would like, can parry, which requires you to hold down a button and then at the right time release the button. So not quite the same as the way that you see in Dark Souls parries, but pretty close enough. And if you do so correctly, you will parry the attack, not taking any damage, and normally get some sort of benefit back against your opponent. Doing so sometimes deals them damage, if I remember correctly, and also it'll reduce essentially like their stagger bar or their poise meter, whatever you want to compare it to, and if you get that down to 0, then you get an extra turn. Very, very Dark Soulsy. And the interesting thing here is that they've removed the necessity to attack back, because as someone who's played a whole lot of Soulsians, that's how Souls games work, is that you find the pattern, you see the telegraph of the attack, you dodge the attack, and then when you have an opening, you get to hit them back. And then rinse and repeat, don't mess it up, at least don't mess it up too much, and then eventually your opponent dies. You do have offensive abilities, although you don't at the very, very beginning of the demo, but you ultimately don't need them, because if you're able to just keep effectively dodging and parrying, depending on your preference, then you can defeat your opponent. So it's kind of like, oh, I dodged correctly, which lowered their HP, which is the same as me dodging in a Dark Souls game, and then, hitting them once with a light attack before I had to get back onto the dodge game again, which is cool. So kind of take Resident Evil, Parasite Eve, and Dark Souls and shove them into a turn-based RPG, and that gives you the time I have left. It's a very unique approach. Now, what I'm going to say, from what I can tell, at least with the most recent announcement from the developers, is not going to be indicative of a lot of other people's experiences. I found the game exceptionally easy, okay? This might be very unique to me, considering that they did an update to the demo to make some things easier, including adding in some abilities and like changing up some timings and stuff like that. Admittedly, I spent the first 30 minutes of the game just getting my shit completely rocked, because I don't know how to read, and instead of dodging away from the direction of the attack, I was dodging into the direction of the attack. So if the attack was coming to the right, I would just turn and put my face straight into it. And I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong until it finally registered to me. And then after that, the game was a absolute cakewalk for me. I played on the balanced difficulty. They have 2 in the demo. There is the story mode and the balanced mode. I got all the way to the final boss of the demo, and I defeated it in my very first attempt. I will admit, it was a little close. It was a little close, but I still did it. And I was like, wow, okay. And that is not to say that the design is bad. It just clicked with my brain really, really well, and I was like, I'm invincible. And yeah, so I just kind of cakewalked my way through the game. That said, though, That doesn't necessarily mean that the mechanics of the game were bad or that it didn't work, because that just meant that I was able to take full advantage of everything at my disposal and do so efficiently and effectively. But the other thing is that even doing so, even being able to perfect fights, it didn't make the fights go a whole lot faster. And so I still felt the pressure of the clock. The demo takes place over one of the chapters, and you have an hour to get through that chapter from everything I can tell. And I completed it with 15 minutes left, or I got to the final boss with 15 minutes left. And the final boss didn't take away any of my time, probably because that fight went for frickin' ever. Now, mind you, at 1/10, I still think I would have been perfectly fine. And also, a minor spoiler for the demo, the boss has 2 health bars, because of course it does, because that's how Soulsian games work. You're like, yeah, I got him. You didn't get shit, bro. Nothing for you. Okay, I understand. Yeah, so I didn't get, that was, I was like, oh, yes, of course. Did the normal Dark Souls thing where I spent all the last of my resources finishing off the boss. Oh, foolish you. Good thing you drank your last flask and then you used the last of your mana to do the super move to attack the boss, thinking that you had won. Foolish. Do you now have to do it again with no resources? Yeah, that was. Yeah, I'm used to that, so it felt appropriately insulting. Again, not a negative, just a reality of the way that I play video games, apparently. Anyway, now, in terms of things that I do feel could have been slightly different about the demo, and this is mostly speaking directly to the developers, because this is to give you a little bit of feedback in terms of things that I immediately noticed one way or the other about the game, okay? One, exceptional game. I really love the demo a lot. It's everything that I really hoped it would be. As somebody who's been following this game very closely and has been very, very excited about this game since the very moment they saw it, I was very happy with it. I have the largest critique is that the movement's a little floaty when you're walking around. Like, a lot of times it felt like Aline was skating around a room rather than actually walking, and that felt a little strange. That's the biggest actual criticism, just so you're aware. Everything else is much more nitpicky. I don't know if there's intentions on voice acting the game, but I think if the game had full voice acting, that would lend really well to the tone and the immersion for it, especially because you do have a section where you have like a shadow alien language being spoken of some sort. And then Aline speaks back to them and there's no voice, but again, that might just be demo stuff. I don't know what your intentions are, but I think that would be extremely beneficial. But I understand limitations of being indie developers. That might not be able to be possible, but I do hope that it is. Otherwise, the only other things that I would say, and again, having only the vertical slice of the demo means that this is probably planned in the game, but the abilities in the demo just were fine. Like, I wasn't super excited, except for the move you get in the boss battle. That was cool as shit, okay? That was awesome. I love the hell out of that. That was really awesome. It felt really good. The animation work and the presentation, great. Loved it. The other abilities were just fine. Like, and if there's an ability to be able to aggregate more skill points at once if you have your tension bar filled up, that would be really cool. But I imagine that's probably a later in the game thing of like emptying your tension bar and getting all the skill points from it instead of only being able to get one at a time. More offensive abilities. I don't know. Being able to move more than one zone also would be cool. But again, I imagine that's a later game ability and the demo takes place earlier in the game. Yeah, stuff like that. Otherwise, though, that's mostly the thoughts that I would have. I really enjoyed everything else about it. I don't even feel like there was a little bit of unclarity, muddiness when it came to like where I was supposed to go and what I was supposed to do next, because the demo puts you into a chapter and it says like time left to complete objective, which I assumed was the end of the chapter, was an hour. And I don't know if it's just because I don't know how to read or if I missed it or what, but I didn't know what the objective was, so I just kept trying to get farther. That was the ultimate goal for me. I don't know what the objective was. And I know that the objective is survive, but I don't feel like it was very super clearly presented to me anywhere. Again, probably just something from the being a vertical slice rather than playing from the beginning of the game, but just a couple of thoughts. Otherwise, though, I really enjoyed it a lot. I will say again to everyone that this game feels special. And I feel like that's really also true of indie development space right now, because there's a lot of very special feeling indie games that are in the works that I really truly hope make their way to the space before us where we get to play and enjoy them. Because I'm going to name a few, and I say these alongside the time I have left as games that I also hope to one day see, because they are just as appealing to me. We just got to see one of them, Hollow Body. It released just before Halloween, and that was great. We played it. I still need to do a video on that because I'm failing my ass off as a content creator. The time I have left was the next one that I was hoping I would get to play next. And I'm really excited to be able to finally play it one day. And then we have AI Code, which is coming around the corner as well. Rune Fencer Ilia is another one. Mighty Rhea. Is it Mighty Rhea or Mighty Rena? I don't remember. I'd have to go look. That one looks really great. There's a lot that are coming around, and I'm really hoping that they are able to cross the finish line. And speaking of crossing the finish line, the last unfortunate news about the time I have left is that we don't know where the finish line is. I have been excitedly waiting for this game, and the original release window was 2024, and we never got a month, we never got a season. We only had the year of 2024, and well, notably, at the time that this video will go live, it is now December of 2024, and there is not a game. And the reason being is that the game is not finished, and that happens a lot with indie projects, of that a lot of these people, they have, much like me being frustrated about wanting to do all the things and not having the time to do it, that is the same for a lot of indie developers, to where they have to work a day job, they have families that need them, they have other responsibilities, some of them might even have more than one job just to be able to make ends meet, because Lord knows is it hard right now. And that the answer to that is to get money from somewhere. And for indie developers, a lot of the time they can't necessarily put the funding up themselves in terms of being able to quit their job and be able to work full-time on the game. So instead they're looking for a publisher to be their crutch. And the developers behind the time I have left did share that while they had searched very hard for a publisher, they weren't able to get one. And I think that's really just because of the state that the gaming landscape is in, that a whole lot of developers that were just handing out money hand over fist 4 years ago have completely stopped. We've seen all the layoffs, we've seen projects be canceled, and that also means that a risky, $1 million for an indie game or whatever is not worth it in the multi-billion-dollar corporation's eyes. So I imagine it's suddenly gotten very difficult for indie developers to find a publisher. So instead, the developers have done what is the go-to course otherwise, which is Kickstarter. I will leave a link to the Kickstarter to the time I have left down below. And if this game looks interesting to you, please consider supporting the production of this game. Unfortunately, the game, even if the Kickstarter is successful, does not look as though it'll be finished until sometime in 2026, which is heartbreaking, I'm sure, for the developers who wanted to be able to have the game finished and out this year. And it's also heartbreaking for me as somebody who has followed the game for a very long time. But I understand. I will be supporting the Kickstarter myself. And if you've ever thought about supporting me as a creator, please instead maybe consider supporting a game that I am very, very interested in. It would mean a lot to me if you would consider supporting the Kickstarter in any means or matter that you can, whether it's sharing this video, sharing the link to the Kickstarter, or supporting them financially to help them meet their goal. That would be really wonderful. I would appreciate it, and I'm sure that they would, of course, appreciate it as well. And I'd strongly recommend checking out the demo if you're unsure of how you feel about it. I understand that this video is a little bit of a ramble, because I wasn't sure the best way to present this, because it's not a review, it's just kind of a presentation. It's here's this game that I got to try, that I've been really excited about, and that I want to see make it so that it can be something that I hold in my memory the way that I hold a lot of other indie games in my memory, because it's a game that I think once it's finished will mean something, not just to me, but to a lot of other people as well. So yeah, I don't know how to even wrap this up. So go check out the time I have left. Go try out the demo. The demo's only 2 hours long if you do absolutely everything. It's got 2 difficulty modes. It's got a very unique presentation, a unique take, and a lot of very notable inspiration that I think they are doing a lot of justice. Understandably, I'm super biased, but it is what it is. But with all that said, I will let you go. Thank you for making it to this point in the video. I appreciate it a lot. If you did enjoy this video, please consider leaving it a like. If you want to catch future videos, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave all your thoughts if you've tried the demo. If you haven't tried the demo, your feedback on this video, feedback on the game. I'm sure I can figure out a way to pass it along to the devs. Please just, you know, engage with this in any way that you see fit. I would appreciate it immensely. There's links to all my social media down below if you want to just link up with me on those instead. I do still have a Twitter account. I understand most people are migrating away from it, but as a creator, that's hard to do right now because it is one of the more active platforms. But I, of course, do have a Blue Sky and have a Threads, and I enjoy both of those platforms immensely as well. I also have an Instagram. There's a Discord. Whatever fits your fancy, please go check it out. But I am actually going to go now instead of rambling through another outro because everyone knows we love it when YouTubers do that. So by all means, thank you so much. Go try out the demo. And if you do go watch one of my other videos or if I see you in the live stream, thank you and enjoy.